Okay, so now you understand how a resting potential is maintained, I can explain how an action potential occurs. Now, an action potential is when you actually get a reversal of that polarization. So it goes from being negative inside the axon to being positive and then back to negative again. And we call this a depolarization and a repolarization of the membrane. So let's look back at this. Now, the first thing that needs to happen is for there to be a small change in the distribution of ions within the axon. So you might get a little bit of diffusion of sodium here. And that little bit of diffusion of sodium is going to make the inside slightly less negative. So instead of being minus 70, it's more likely to be minus 50 millivolts. And if it does get to this point, which is known as the threshold, then this triggers an action potential to take place in that part of the membrane. So what happens in an action potential when it gets to minus 50 millivolts, the threshold? These, which are the voltage-gated sodium channels, they actually open. And because there's loads of sodium outside, and it's also more positive outside, these sodium ions move into the axon, and they move firstly by electrostatic attraction and also by their concentration gradient. And they'll keep moving in until it gets more positive inside than outside. And actually it becomes plus 40 millivolts inside. And at this point, those gates shut. And those gates shut, but the potassium, voltage-gated potassium channels, they actually open. And when they open, potassium moves out through electrostatic attraction and also down its concentration gradient. And then the inside becomes more negative again, and it actually diffuses out so much that it actually becomes more negative, and it actually goes to minus 80 millivolts. So it's gone from being minus 70 to minus 50, which is the threshold, all the way up to plus 40, and then back down again to minus 80. Now at minus 80, those gates will shut, and you actually need to actually then use the sodium-potassium pump to restore the ions to where they should be. So the next thing that happens is the sodium-potassium pump pumps the sodium's out and the potassium's back in to restore those concentration gradients. And that is the end of our action potential.